Hi and welcome to this new React project. In this tutorial, we're gonna create this React on this day website. So first, we're gonna learn how to scrape web data using Puppeteer. Then we're gonna learn how to create new functions Firebase project and save all of that data inside of the Firebase. Then we're gonna learn how to create these Firebase Cloud Functions and execute this Node.js function on every day at midnight. After that, we're gonna create new React UI project and we're gonna learn how to integrate a Firebase with React. In this application, we're gonna read the data that we previously saved inside of the Firebase from the Puppeteer function. And what's amazing about this website is that you only have to set up this function and this UI only once. Once you do that, the function is running on the cloud and it keeps updating your Firebase with new data, which makes your website dynamic and always up to date. If this video reaches 1000 likes on my channel, I will be releasing the full source code of this project. Meanwhile, you can check my Patreon, Code with Sloba, for full source code.
Code with Sloba.
And welcome back. So this is the website that we are going to be building in this tutorial. Let's start off by building new Node.js project. So let me close the browser and let's create a new folder on the desktop. And I will name this folder this day. Now we can open this folder in Visual Studio Code. Let me just resize it for a second. And now let's open the folder from the desktop. This day. Now the first thing that I want to do is to initialize the Firebase tools. So let's open up the terminal from the bottom. And make sure to use the git bash as a terminal. And now let's type in the following command: npm I for install firebase -tools -g for global installation, and hit enter. Let's wait for a couple of minutes. Now we have Firebase tools initialized and created for us and available on our system. So let's create a Firebase login. First, we need to log into the Firebase so that we can create application from the terminal. So run the following command: Firebase login. Here, just type in yes. And now select the account that you want to log in with. And press allow. And we have successfully been logged in. So we can close this. And there you go. Let's clear the console. Now I want to create a new Firebase project. And we can do that by simply running Firebase init and just hit enter. It asks, are you ready to proceed? Type Y for yes. And now, which Firebase features do you want to set up for this directory? As in these projects, we want to set up the functions that will run on cloud on every single day at a specific time. So using the arrow keys, we can navigate down to the functions. To select this option, just hit space. And now we can hit enter. Now we can create a new project or use an existing project. But I will create a new project so that we can go through the setup entirely. So just hit enter here. And now we need to specify a unique project ID. So I will type Sloba -on this -day. And let's just hit enter. What would you like to call your project? I can give the same name, so Sloba -on this day, and just hit enter. And now it's creating a new project for us. Let's wait for a couple of minutes to finish it up. And now it has completed creating the project for us. Now we have a question: what language would you like to use to write cloud functions? I will select JavaScript and just hit enter. Do you want to use ESLint to catch probable bugs and enforce styles? For this project, I will select no. And now it asks, do you want to install dependencies with npm now? Yes, I want to do that, so just select Y and hit enter. And I'll be back in a couple of seconds once it's done. And now Firebase initialization has been completed. So we have this new functions folder in our directory or in our project. And here we have node modules installed for us. We have standard Node.js project here. So we have the packages that we have and the scripts that we can run inside of our project. And we have this index.js file. So this is the main file where we're going to be writing our functions. And once we are done with writing the functions, we can deploy them to our Firebase project. So let's uncomment this hello world function, which just gives some logger text. That's all it does. And let me enlarge this code editor a little bit so it's more visible, like so. And now let's save this file and let's run the following command to deploy it. Firebase deploy and hit enter. Now you can see that we get this following error. Your project Sloba on this day must be on a blaze, pays-as-you-go plan to complete this command. What this essentially means is, in order to run the functions on the cloud, we actually need to have a paid plan. We don't have to pay for anything because the usage of the functions in the cloud is not going to be at the level that you need to pay for something. But we just need to set up the card and the payment and we can proceed without paying for anything. So trust me, it's free. So let's click on this link and let's set up that plan. So click on it and let's open in the browser. Then you need to select the account that has the access to this project. And here we need to modify the plan. So just click on modify plan. And this is the plan that we need to select. Blaze pay as you go. So if you exceed the amount of requests that you send with your application, you will have to pay some additionally. But for the project that I'm creating, that's very low in requests because we're going to send only one request per, and there is no concerns that we're going to reach any level that we need to pay. So just click on the select plan. And here you need to set up the Firebase payment. So click on continue. And here in the budget amount in USD, you can just limit to 0 because we don't want to spend any amount of money and we're not going to reach to that level, as I said earlier. So just set to 0. So this way you're making sure that you're not spending any amount of dollars. Click on continue and let's just click on purchase. And there you go. We have successfully upgraded our project. In case you haven't set up a paying plan for your Firebase, it will ask you to add a card. But I already have completed that. So for me, this has been done. Okay, we can continue now with deploying our functions. So let's get back to Visual Studio Code and let's try again. So type in again, Firebase deploy and hit enter. And now we're getting this new Google Cloud Storage error. So this basically means that we need to create Google Cloud Storage. So let's head over to our Firebase console, click on the build on the left side here, and let's find the Firebase database. Let's click on it. Now we can create a new database for this project. So click on create database. First we need to select in which mode we want to start. For the development purpose, I want to start in a test mode. So click on the start in test mode. And let's click on next. The next thing that we want to set up is the location of the Firebase. So I'm going to click on Europe because this one is closest to me. And let's click on enable. Let's wait for a couple of minutes. And now the Firebase database has been completed. And now let's open our project again and let's try to deploy once again. So run Firebase deploy and hit enter. Let's wait for a couple of seconds. And now the deployment has been successfully completed. Let's head over to our Firebase console once again. And let's open up the build and open up the functions. And here we can see the function that we just uploaded here. This function runs on HTTP requests. But we want to create a new function that using PubSub runs on every single day at a specific time frame using PubSub. So let's do that. Let's head over to our Visual Studio Code and let me shrink this down and let me remove actually this hello world function. And what this function will do is it will call a scraper that goes to Wikipedia, scrapes the data from Wikipedia and store that in a Firebase collection. So having that in mind, let's create a new file inside of the functions and let's name that file as scraper.js. And library that we're going to use for scraping the data is called Puppeteer. So let's install this library. open the terminal and let's cd into functions folder and let's run npm install Puppeteer and hit enter. Package has been added, so we can close the terminal and we can import that inside of our file. So create a new constant and let's name this one as Puppeteer, and we'll just require the package that we just installed, Puppeteer. And now let's create a new function that we will export from this file and import inside of the index.js. So let's name this function as scrape data, and it's going to be asynchronous function. So add async keyword, and let's export it. On the bottom, just type in exports dot scrape data equals to scrape data, like so. The first thing that we need to do in order to scrape the data is to have the browser. So let's first download the browser, and it's going to be the Chromium browser. So we're going to await for this function, and let's call the Puppeteer dot create browser fetcher, and now we want to download our browser. So pass in Puppeteer dot Puppeteer revisions underscore revisions dot Chromium, like so. And now we should have our browser available so that we can launch it. So let's store this browser in a variable named browser and let's launch it. So we do that by running the command puppeteer.launch, and we pass in a parameter whether we want to be a headless or not. For this one we want to be false because we want to see the browser and to see actually what we're getting. Okay, let's save that. The next thing that we want to do is to create a new page variable, and what we want to do is we want to use our browser to create a new page. So call the browser dot new page function, like so. And now we can use this page and navigate to Wikipedia. So let's type in await page and go to, this is the function that we use, and here we provide the URL where we want to go to. So type in the URL of the Wikipedia. So I can go to Wikipedia and actually just copy paste the URL. So this is the page that we're gonna scrape the data from. As you can see, they have this on this day section, and we're gonna scrape from that. So just copy this URL and let's paste it here. And we wanna wait the entire DOM to be loaded because we wanna make sure that all the divs and the texts that we are gonna scrape are there. So pass in this flag, wait until DOM content loaded, like so. Let's save this file and let's run to see do we have it set up correctly. So let's call our function here, scrape data. Here we are calling it. Let's save it and let's open up the terminal and let's execute. We can run just node and pass in the name of the file, which is scraper.js, and let's hit enter. And there you go. We have opened up a new browser and we have navigated to this main page of Wikipedia, as you can see in the URL. And this is the div that we're going to actually scrape for our new website. Wonderful. So let me close this terminal and let's writing this scraping code here. So let's type page.evaluate. This is the function which gets invoked once we navigate to a page and before any JavaScript gets executed, even before any scripts gets included. And this is asynchronous function, so we need to add async, or actually await. And inside of this function, we provide another function. And the result of this function, it's going to need to be scraped data, which we want to save inside of a variable. Now let's name this variable as body, like so. Now the first thing that I want to target is the image. So let me navigate to the Wikipedia. So this is the image that I want to target. And if we inspect this, let me bring this down. Here, you can see that we have this folder structure. So let me zoom a little bit. So this is the image that we want to use as a preview image. So let's query that. We will store this image reference to a variable, and let's name this variable as image reference. Now let's use the document query selector. And we want to target first the parent element, which is the ID of MP, which stands for main page dash OTD, which stands for on this day. And then we want to target MP dash OTD dash IMG, and this is the wrapper of the image. And then we want to target the image itself. Now the next thing that I want to target is this list of events. So we need to target the child unordered list and then the li elements. So let's do that. Let's store it in a variable and name this variable as list reference. And we're going to use document.query selector all. And again, we're going to use a dash, or actually pound mp dash OTD, and we want to target the child unordered list and the list elements. Now from the image reference, we want to take the source. So if we inspect the image, we can see that inside of the source attribute, just a second, here, let me just take the pen. So here inside of the source attribute, we have the URL that we want to take. Okay, so let's do that. So let's create a new variable and let's call this one image source. And I'm defining this one as let and not const because we're going to change the path itself. We're going to see in a second. So let's call the image reference, and you want to get attribute. So this is the function that we need to call. And here we provide the name of the attribute, and the name is src, which is the source. Now let's just change the name of the variable to be source as well. And now let's try to log this to see what result do we get. So let's just return the image source here. After the function, let's close the browser. So call the browser.close method. And let's just return the body. And now since we are returning a promise, we need to call the then function. And inside of this function, let's just log the result that we are getting back from the function. So let's name it as a res and just use the console.log res. Let's save this. And let's open up the terminal. And let's run the node scraper.js. And as you can see, we get the URL of the image. So let me copy this and let me paste in the browser. But the problem with this one is that we are getting a thumbnail, not a full resolution image. So we can solve this problem by modifying the URL of this image. The first thing that we need to do is to remove this thumb, which stands for a thumbnail. And then, as you can see, we have 2 times the JPG extension and the name of the image. So we want to cut off the second part, like so. And now we get the full resolution. So let's do that inside of the code. First, let me close the terminal. Let me close the folders. And here, let's first replace that thumb string. So image source.replace. And we want to replace the thumb and / with empty string, so with nothing. And we want to store that inside of our image source. Next, we need to remove the extension and the image name, which appears twice in the thumbnail. So we're going to do that using the image source. We're first going to find the index of the image. So let's use the index of. and we want to find the index of .jpg /. And we want to save this extension index, so let's save it inside of a variable, and let's name this one as file extension index. And now we can cut the first part of that string, so let's assign that to the image source again, and let's take the substring method. We're gonna cut from the 0 index to the index that we defined here, and we also want to add the 4 characters because we want to include the JPG as well. So it's 0 1 2 3 4. That's why we are adding 4 here. Let's save this and let's try again. So let me open the terminal, let me clear the console, and let's run the again scraper. And now we get the file that should be in full resolution. So let me copy this. Let me open the browser. And there you go. Now we just need to target a couple of edge cases. Sometimes this JPG extension is actually PNG, and sometimes they use the uppercase on the URL. So what we can do is we can add all of those cases and just use the index that we got mapped. So we can use the math.max to take the index, which is the largest one. All the other indexes are going to be -1, but the one that actually got the extension is going to be the index of that character. So let's just add a comma here, and let's add when the extension is uppercase. So JPG is uppercase. The next one is when we have a PNG, and the next one is when we have PNG uppercase. So let me just set the format to word wrap. And the next one is when we have PNG uppercase, like so. Now the next thing that we want to target and scrape is this list reference. So let's return both of these and to see what we get in an object. So let's return the image source and the list reference. Let's save this and let's run once again. And as you can see, we get the image path and the list reference, which is just a bunch of DOM elements in JSON representation. And what we want to do is loop through the items here and take the text and the links of these items. So if we go back to the Wikipedia, we can see that if I inspect the list elements, we want to take the text here, and also we want to take the URL so that we can navigate there. So let's do that. Let me close the terminal. We want to loop to the list reference, but as this is not an array, this is actually an object, so we need to create an array. So let's call the array from function, and we pass the list reference. And now we can map this and iterate. So we get access to the item inside of this callback function, and the results we want to store in a new variable, and let's name this one as a list. First I want to target the link. So if I go to Wikipedia, I want to target this link on the bold, inside of the bold, because this is the most important link inside of this list item. So we want to target the bold element and then anchor tag. So let's add a new variable where we're going to store that, and let's name this one as item link. And we're going to use the item.querySelector, and we're going to target, like I said, B for bold and anchor tag. And now we need to get the href attribute out of it. So call the get attribute, and the name of the attribute is href. Now we can return that inside of a new object. So let's create a new object, and the first thing is going to be the link, and it's going to be the link that we just created here. But we need to append this link on the Wikipedia main URL. So first we need to check if the link exists. If it does, we want to add on top of the https://n, which stands for English version of Wikipedia, wikipedia.org / and then we add our item link. But if the link is empty, we want to just return undefined. And the second thing that we want to return is the actual text. And we simply access that by the item.innerText, like so. Now let's save once again and let's see what we get. Let's clear the console and let's run the scraper once again. But we forgot to return this new list that we are creating because we are returning only the list reference. So now let's replace this list reference with a list. Let's save this and let's run once again. And now if we inspect, the first thing that we are getting, let me just enlarge this. The first thing is image source, and then we get this list array. And inside of this array, we get the links and we get the text for every single item. Now if we click on this link, let's just test it out. We get this article, more detailed article about each item in the list. That's awesome. And let me close the terminal. And basically that's all we wanted to do with this scraper. And all we are doing is basically we are creating a new browser here, and we are storing this browser in a variable, and then we are creating a new page. Then we are navigating to this page on Wikipedia, which is the main Wikipedia page. And then inside of this page, we are taking the image reference, we are taking the image source, then we are taking the list reference. And then we are mapping this array into a new object that has links and a text. And now we want to return all of that inside of this body. And then we want to store that inside of the Firebase collection. So we can remove this console log now. And also we can set the headless to be true. Because when we run this on the cloud, we don't need to open the browser, and the browser can be opened in the terminal. And that's all we want. Now we can call this function inside of our index.js file and save that in a Firebase, and then make our cloud function, which will execute every single day and store new data over there. First, let's import the scraper, which we just created. So type in require, and let's import the scraper. And we need to save this in a constant. So name this constant as script, like so. And one more thing that we need to import is the Firebase admin. So require Firebase admin, and let's store that in a variable, and let's name this variable as admin as well, like so. Now we need to initialize our Firebase application. So we do that by running the admin and dot initialize app, like so. We will also need the access to our database in Firebase, so we can do that by running the admin.firestore. And we execute this function, and this function returns the Firestore or the database. So we can save that in new constant, and let's name this one as DB. We will need this database reference in order to save the data that we are scraping from the web. When we scrape the data, we want to save them in a new document. So the name of the document is going to be the day when we scraped the data. And then we can very easily find that data using the features like calendar or some similar features. So let's create a function that will return the formatted day. So let's name this one as constant get today. And it's going to be a fat arrow function. First, let's create a new date, which is the current date. And let's store that in a variable, and let's name this variable as today. And now we want to format this date in a format that's good for Firebase. For example, we have a 5th of February, or actually 5th of February 2023. This is the format that we want to get from our function. So let's just return a new string. And inside of this string, let's open up JavaScript expression. And we want to get from today, we want to get a date. This is for a day. And then we want to get our month. So today dot get month. And you need to add 1 to it because it's indexed from 0. And at the end we want to get full year. So today dot get full year. And we can just add a semicolon at the end here and up to the function. And that looks good. Now let's create that Firebase Cloud function that will run at every midnight. So I want to export it first as pub_sub. So pub_sub is just name of the function. And we want to use the functions from Firebase. This is what we imported here. And the first thing that we need to do is to define the region where we want to deploy this function. So use the function region, and I will set Europe-West 3. This is the region which we created and stored once we created this Firebase application. Next thing is we need to allocate how much memory this function needs. So we do that by using the function runWith. And then we define how much memory we want to allocate. I will set here to 2 GB. If you don't have enough memory for your function allocated, it may actually set a timeout and actually then fail to execute. Next, we want to schedule our function. So we do that by using the pub_sub feature, and we call the schedule method. And here we need to define a cron expression. So we want this to be run at midnight. So 0 minutes and 0 hours. And we want this to be run every single day of a month, every single month, and every single day of the week. So this is the syntax if you want to run something at midnight every single day. Also, we want to set a time zone. So where we want to run this at midnight. So I will set for my time zone. So set the time zone to Europe/Belgrade. And now, when this function gets invoked, we want to run asynchronous function. So type in on run, and we want to run a callback function. So type in async because this is going to be asynchronous function. And I want to wrap this in a try catch block. In case something fails, we will get that logged in a Firebase console. First, we want to scrape for data. So type in await scraper, and the name of the function is scrape data. And we want to save this result in a constant, and let's name it scraped data. And now we want to save that in a Firebase collection. So let's call the db.collection, and we're going to create a new collection and name this one as a days. And then we want to create a new document, and name of this document is going to be the day, using this function that we just created a couple of seconds ago. So call this getToday, and this will just return numbers that correspond to the current day. And we want to upload the data that we just scraped. So use the set function to do that and just paste here, scrape data. And don't forget to add await because this is asynchronous function. In case we get an error, we want to throw new error. So this gets caught by the Firebase console and we can read what's went wrong. So just log the error. Now let's save this and we can deploy our function actually. Let me clear my console. And before we deploy our function, can try to run it to see if we get any errors. So let's cd into functions folder. So this is the folder where we have all our files. And now let's run in npm run start and hit enter. And we get the Firebase shell running. So we have loaded the function, and the name of the function is pub_sub, the same as we declared here. Now we can execute this function by just calling it. So type in pub_sub and execute and hit enter. And here we get successfully invoked function, and we get some warning that this may be running on production. So this is perfect. So just close the console with Ctrl+C. Let's clear the console and let's deploy. So type in Firebase deploy and hit enter. Let's wait for a couple of seconds. Now we get asked that the following function is not found in the project. And this is the function that we uploaded on the first upload, but we after that deleted it. So let's say yes, as we want this to be deleted. Now we get that successful delete operation confirmed. And now the deployment has been completed. So let's head over to the Firebase console and let's refresh this page. And you can see that we have new pub_sub function uploaded here. Trigger for this one is actually scheduled. You can see scheduled cloud pub_sub. And if you go to our Firebase collection, so go to Firebase database, you can see that we executed this function on our Firebase shell on our local host, and it created a new collection which is named days, and it created a new document which is 23rd of March of 2023. And it added image source which will be featured on our website. Also it added a list with all of these items, and every single item has a link to the Wikipedia article and a text. Beautiful. Now what we need to do is to create a React project and fetch all of this data and create that nice application. Let's do that. So I can close this browser and let's open new Git bash here on the desktop. For creating new React project, I'm going to be using the Vite. So type in the following command: npm create Vite at latest, and name of this project is going to be this-day-ui. And now we need to pass in a template. So -- space and again -- template, and we want to create React project. Now just hit enter. So this created a new project already, and we need to cd into this project and to run install. So cd this-day-ui and just run npm install or I. And let's wait for a couple of seconds to finish this up. Installation has been completed, and now let's open this in Visual Studio Code. So let's click on File, Open Folder, and let's find it on Desktop, this day UI, and open the folder. Okay, let me make this window much larger. And now we will need to add a Firebase package. So let's open up the terminal. So to install the Firebase, just type in npm install Firebase and hit enter. That has been completed. Now let's clear the terminal. And now I want to install the Tailwind as well. So npm install -d Tailwind CSS, post CSS, and auto prefixer, and hit enter. Let's wait for a couple of seconds, and great. Now let's clear the terminal. Now I want to initialize the Tailwind CSS, so run the npx Tailwind CSS init and -p and hit enter. And we created new post CSS and Tailwind configuration files. Now there is one more library which I want to install. So let's type in npm install react-calendar So this is going to be for the calendar feature, obviously. Let's wait, and it has been installed. Let's clear the terminal again, or actually we can close it. Now let's include the necessary files for Tailwind CSS, and we can do that inside of the source and index.css here. And here on top of this file, let's import Tailwind base. Let's copy paste this 3 times. We want to import components and utilities. Now we can clean up this a little bit. So what we can do is we can actually remove all of this code. In here we can remove all of this. Now let's just set the font family to be default to Helvetica. Or actually we can use Helvetica New. So Helvetica New, like this. So let's save this. Now to make the Tailwind works, we need to go to the Tailwind config file here, and we need to add inside of this content which files we want to get compiled. So first let's target index.html, and then let's target all the files in the source folder. Let me just reformat this. Okay, so inside of the source folder, src, all the folders and all the files with the extension of JS, TS, JSX and TSX, like so. Now let's save this and let's close this configuration file, and let's try to run our project. So type in npm run dev and hit enter. Let's open up here, and we have our project running. Although as we removed all the styles, it looks like it's broken, but it's working correctly. So let's clean up this. Let me shrink it down. Now I want to create a dark theme of our application. So let's add a dark class. Dark, like so. And let's apply some background color to it. So apply PG gray -800. And let's add a text to sync 50. Now we can use this class, and let's add this class inside of our index file. So go to index.html and let's add this class to the HTML. So class dark, and what we can do also, we can go into the app.jsx file here, and just to clean up this function. So let's remove all this boilerplate code, like so. And let's remove this class name as well, we don't need that. And we can remove this use state as well. We can remove the logos that you're not using anymore, and we're not using the app CSS either. So let's save this and let's preview, and we get our dark background. That's beautiful. Let's continue. Now let's initialize our Firebase application. So let's head over to our Firebase and let's open up the project view. You can go to the project settings, and now let's just scroll a little bit down, and here we can integrate. We can choose our applications, and for us is the third one. The first one is iOS, the second one is for Android, and the third one is for the web. So click here, let's add application name. Let's type in something like Sloba on this day, something like that. And we can add test as well. Why not? And click on the register app. Let's wait for a couple of seconds. And now we got our Firebase initialization code generated. So just make sure to copy that. And let's close that. And let's go inside of our project. Let's create a new file here. And let's name it constants.js. And here I will just paste this. And I will export it like so. Now we can go in our main.jsx file here, and let's initialize our Firebase application. But first we need to import the packages that we need for that initialization. So let's import, and first one is initialize app from Firebase /app. The next one is get Firestore. So import get Firestore so that we can get a reference to our database. And we import that from Firebase. Make sure to spell it correctly here. Import from Firebase /Firestore/lite. And we need to import our configuration object. So import, and name of the configuration object is Firebase config. So import Firebase config from in the current folder from the constants. Now let's just run this initialize app function here, and let's pass in Firebase configuration as a parameter. We should receive back new application, so we can store that inside of the app. And now we can create, or actually get a reference to our database. So we will call this get Firestore, and we need to pass the application. And we get back the Firestore, which we can use throughout our application. So we should export that in a constant, and let's name it as db for database. Perfect. So let's save it. Now we can go and create a separate file where we can store our function for fetching the data from the Firestore. So inside of this source folder, let's create a new file, and let's name this one just as functions.js. Okay, let's close all the other files, and let's import a couple of packages that we need for this file. So let's import getDoc from Firestore and the doc itself. And we want to import that from @Firebase /Firestore/lite, like so. And we want to import the reference to our database, so we have that inside of our main file. So from main, remember we just exported here. Okay, so let's create a new function and name this function as get this day events, and this will return, or actually this will receive a day as a parameter. This would be asynchronous function, so add async, and let's define this as a function. And we also want to export this like so. First thing is that we need to get the reference to our days collection. So if we go over to our project, and if we open up Firestore database, you can see that we have this days collection. So we need to get a reference to this first. So create a new constant, and let's name this constant as daysRef. And make sure to spell it correctly. And we get the reference by using the doc function. And we pass in the name of the database, and then we pass in days, which is the name of the collection. And then inside of this collection, we want to target a specific document. So just pass in the day that we're going to get passed when we invoke this function. So with this, we're actually getting the actual document inside of the collection. So that's why we are using this function doc. In order to get this document, we need to execute this getDoc function, and we need to pass in the document reference. This is asynchronous function, so we need to add await, and we also can store that inside of the variable. So save it as doc.snap. And then we can just return that and extract the data from this snapshot. So, and let's make this n as lowercase so that we have correct camel case format. So that's it. Let's save this. And apart from this function, we will also need another helper function. So similar like we had on the previous Firebase project. So this one will be called getFormatedDay. So this one will serve to create a format for reading the collection. So if you go to the Firebase, you can see this is the ID of the document. So again, we want to take the current day and get this number representation of the current day. So we're going to create this helper function for that. So again, let's export this function, and this function will retrieve a date as a parameter, and then we want to format that date. So we will just return basically a new string, and we will get first date, then we're gonna get, just make sure to place it outside of this current expression, day.getMonth, and add 1 to it because it starts from the 0 index, and the last one is full year, so day.get full year, like so. And that's all it does. Let's save it, and we can get to our app.jsx file. And let's first import this function that we just created. So let me copy the names of it. So import get this day events and get formatted day from functions, like so. Now we will need a couple of variables to handle and manage the state of this component. So the first one can be selected date, and here we'll be storing the current date and the date when we change the calendar date. So we will call this one the selected date, and the updater function will be set selected date, and we're going to use the useState hook, and we're going to set the first value to be new date. So when we load our page, this is going to be the current date. So let me copy paste this, and the second variable that we need is the events. These are the events that we're gonna fetch from the Firebase collection. So set the updater function to set events, and it's gonna be empty at start, empty array, or actually empty object, or we can even set it as null. That's more explicit. And now we can create a new function where we'll be calling this get this day events. So let's name this one as get events, and we're gonna call this from the useEffect hook. Here you pass in a day you want to get information from, or events, and then we call this get this day events function that we created previously, and we want to pass the day that we want to get from. So we can use this get formatted day, and for here I want to pass in the day, obviously. And then when we get the result back, we want to save that result inside of our events variable. So just make sure to spell correctly. So inside of this, then we have this callback function, and here we want to call this set events and pass in the rest. Let's add the semicolons to close this function, and now we can add a useEffect hook to call this function once the component is get loaded. So let's import the useEffect hook on the top here, useEffect, and let's call this hook useEffect. It is going to be run only at the beginning. So let's pass an empty dependency array, and let's call our getEvents function. As an argument, let's pass this selected date, like so. And just for testing purposes, let's console log this. Here, and let's save this, and let's see what we get in the console. So refresh our page, let's open the console. And don't worry about these errors. These are the errors that you get from the project setup itself. It's not related to something that you write. But as you can see, we are getting the current date and not the list that we are fetching. So let's fix that. Instead of logging the selected date, let's log the events here. Let's save and let's try once again. So let's clear the console. And first, on the first two renders, we get null, and then we get the image source and we get the list. How easy was that? Let's make the actual HTML code or JSX to make this rendered. Awesome. And now inside of our app.jsx file, let's add a wrapper div. So add a class name, and the name of this class is max width screen LG. So we are setting the maximum width of our container. Now let's center this container, and we will set the margin on the left and on the right to be auto. And I want to set dividers for the child div elements. So let's add a divide-y class, like so. For the first child element, I want to place an h1 heading. So here we're gonna say this day in history. And let's add a class to this title. Let's add some margin on the top. So margin top 6. Let's set the text size to 4 XL. Next, let's make it as a flex because we're gonna have a button on the right side. And let's set the justified between. Also, let's add some margin on the bottom. So set the MB to 6, like so. Next, let's create a span here. And inside of this span, we're gonna display what is the current date. And actually, let's surround this entire part with a span as well, because we want this to be displayed on the left side of the title, and on the right side, we're gonna have button as I just mentioned. So let's format this document, and inside of this span, we can first get the month of the selected date. Just call the selected date dot get month, and I want to display the day. So selected date dot get date. Let's save this and let's see what we have. Let me refresh. And as you can see, we get the format of the month as a number. So we need to create strings for months. Let's do that. So let's create a new constant here inside of the constants.js. And let's export this constant and let's name it months. So it's just going to be an array of strings. And here we're going to place the months. January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, just bear with me, November, and the last one is December, like so. And now we can use this constant in our app.jsx file. So let's first import it on the top. Import months from constants, and now we can use it here. So just call this constant and open up the brackets so that we can access the values of the string. So let's save this and let's see now. If I refresh, we get the March of 24th. But we need to apply some styling. As you can see, everything is combined together. There is no spacing at all. And I want to apply some special styles here. So let's do that. So let's add a class name to this span. And let's add a background of yellow 300. So it's more it more attracts views of the visitors. Let's set the edges to be rounded LG, and let's add some padding on the left and the right side, so px2, and then let's add some margin on the left side so it's separated from this text. Margin left and set it to 2. Then let's add a color for text, text-slate-800. Let's make the text bold, so font bold, and let's make it larger, text-2XL. Let's save it now, and let's see. If I refresh, that looks much nicer. Okay, but let's add just some space in between of these two lines. Okay, we can just add a string here, like so. Now next to this span, I want to add a div, or actually we can use a span as well. And inside of this span, we're going to have text, and when we click on this text, we want to open up a calendar. Here we have another span, and we will have a text of different day in lack of a better wording. Now let's add a class name. Let's add on medium resolution and higher. Let's add a little bit of line height, so leading 8. This means that on smaller devices, we're not going to have a bigger line height, but on the larger devices, we want it to appear more like a button. So let's add a class name to this container as well. First, let's add a padding on the left and on the right side, px-4. Some padding on the bottom and the top, py2. Then let's make the font semi-bold. For the font size, set the text to be small. Let's create the background color and set the background color as cyan-500. The font color will be white, so text-white. And I want to make it rounded, so set the rounded-full. Also, let's add some shadow, so shadow-sm for small shadow. And let's add a cursor pointer, so it behaves like a button. Now on mobile devices, I want to position this as absolute, but on the larger devices and on the medium ones, I want it to be relative, like so. So position on the mobile devices will be top-7, so in the top right corner, and the right position will be 1. Okay, but on the medium and large devices, top is going to remain 0, and MD right is going to remain 0. -0. Let's save and let's see what we have now. Let me refresh the page, and here we get this nice beautiful button. So now when we click on it, I want to see a calendar. So let's do that. So let's add an on-click event handler here before the class name. And we will invoke a function. And here we will need to call a setter function. So let's create one for the calendar. We can copy paste the one for the events, and let's call this one as isCalendarVisible. And we need the setter function as well. So let's create it set isCalendarVisible. And now we can use this function, but for the initial state, we want to set it to false, like so. And now when we click on a button, we want to set the calendar visible to true. Or if you want to toggle the state of a calendar, you can set the opposite of the current state of the calendar, like so. And now we need to import the calendar and show it here below. So let's import that. Import calendar from React Calendar. And we also want to import the CSS. So import React-calendar /dist/calendar.css. And now we can use this calendar inside of our JSX code here. So let's add a space and open up a JavaScript expression. First, we want to check, is calendar visible? If it is, let's display some calendar. So let's add a span so that we can apply some styles to it. So let's position our calendar as absolute. So add a class name and a position of absolute. Set the right position to be 0. And we want to display it below our button. So set the top to be 12. Like so. Set the z index to 10 so we make sure that it is on top of the content. And let's add some drop shadow. Drop dash shadow dash to XL. Now inside of this span, let's add a calendar. And let me close this folder so that we can see better. So for the calendar, we want to add a value to the calendar. So let's add a value, and we need to create this variable. So we can copy this one and let's name it as calendar date. And the setter function will be named as set calendar date. And the value is going to be new date. And now we can use this variable and pass it as a value. Calendar date, like so. And now when we select a value in the calendar, we want to update this variable. So let's call the onChange event handler, and we will pass a function where we get the date as a parameter, and we want to handle this data. So let's create a new function and let's name it handle date change, and we'll pass the new date. So let's copy this handle date change and let's create a new function here. It's going to be a fat arrow function that receives the value of a calendar. So from this value, let's create a new date and let's name it new selected date. And we're just going to initialize new date object, and we're going to pass this date like so. The next thing which I want to do is to update the selected date, because we have changed the selected date of our application and we want to display the events for that date. So set the selected date to new selected date here. And we want to fetch the events for this new selected date. So let's call this get events function, and let's pass the new selected date as well here. And we also want to update the value of the calendar. So let's call this set calendar date here. And let's pass this new selected date value as well, like so. So let me save it and let's see what we have. Let's refresh this page. If we click on a different day, we get our calendar, but you can see that CSS code is not working correctly. The reason for that is the calendar is set for the white theme and we have some interference with the CSS. So let's fix that for a second. Let's open our index.css file here and let's apply some colors to our calendar. So let's target the React-calendar and let's apply some background color similar to what we were doing before to our body. But let's make it a little bit different and let's set the value of 700. Now I also want to change the background color of the buttons on the calendar, because this is the setting up the background of the entire calendar. So let's target the React-calendar __ title -enabled on hover, and we want to target React calendar __ navigation button. So these are the buttons on the days when we click when we want to change a date. Enabled on hover, and we want to change them on focus as well. And I want to set the background to be exactly the one that we have on our website background. So set to 800. Now let's save and let's see. Do we fix the issues with the calendar? And there you go. This is the result that I wanted. So let's continue on creating the image for the featured event and then to display all the rest of the events that we get for this day. Now we can close this index.css file. And inside of our app.jsx file, let's scroll a bit down. We can close this h1 and we want to add our featured event below that. So let's open the JavaScript expression. And here we want to check if the events exist. And we have a list with length. So only if we have the length inside of the list, otherwise we're going to display a message. And let's do that quickly. So here, open another JavaScript expression and check if we don't have events or the list inside of the events, or it's empty, or the length is just 0. So if we have this case, we want to add a paragraph, and let's add a class name to add some padding on the top here. And let's display a message to the users. So here we're going to say just, unfortunately, we don't have information for this day. And that's it. But if we have the information, we want to render a div here. So let's add React fragment. And let's add a wrapper div. Let's add some padding on the top. So add a class name and set the padding top to be 6. Inside of this wrapper, first thing I want to add is h2. So heading, and let's say here, featured event. Let's add some styles. So this title. Let's increase the text. So set the text to 2XL. And let's add some margin on the bottom. So margin bottom 4. Below this, we're going to have an image and a text. And when we click on that, we want to go over to the Wikipedia if we want to read more about this event. So let's add an anchor tag and let's add our href. So the value for this href is going to be events.list, and we're going to take the first item from the list. And we're just going to take the link from that. And we want to open that in a new tab. So add a target as _blank, like so. We're also going to add some copyright note for the image that we're going to be using. And that copyright note is going to be positioned absolute. So we need to set the class name and to set the rule to position to relative for our anchor tag here. Just make sure to spell it correctly. Okay. Next, let's open a div here. And inside of this div, we want to place an image. And the source of this image is going to be the featured event. So let's take this source, and it's going to be event.imageSource. If you forgot about where we get this image source, so let me save this and let me show you in the browser. So if I refresh, it says unfortunately we don't have information for this day. And let me inspect the console. Here, if you go to the console, if you check the object, we have the image source and we have the list. So something is not being rendered correctly. So let me check it again. And that's because we have a typo here. We haven't spelled it correctly. Length, like so. And let's make sure to spell it correctly here as well. Let's save now and let's see. If we refresh our page now, we get our featured event, as you can see. So we're getting this image. The next, what we want to do is we want to display the text of this event and then display the rest of these 4 events. So let's do that. So next to the image, I want to add a paragraph with a text. And inside of this paragraph, let's access the events dot list, and we want to target the first element in the list and we just want to take the text. Let's apply some styles to this paragraph. Let's add padding on the right, so set the padding right 4, and let's add padding on the bottom and on the top as well to be 4. Next to this paragraph, I want to add additional paragraph, and this one will be show the copyright where we got this image. So we're gonna display it as absolute position, and it's going to be displayed in the footer of the image. So set the position to be absolute and set it to be on the bottom and set the text to be small. Inside of the text, let's add italic tag, and let's add a class name of text extreme small. This is on the mobile devices, and on the medium and large devices, let's set the text to be small. And for the text, let's add a copyright, and I copy this from the web. You can do the same, and let's type in the URL https://n.wikipedia.org, like so. And now, since we position this as absolute, we need to add some styles to the wrapper there. So let's add a class name as well, and let's set first the maximum width to be LG. Let's add some rounded edges, so rounded dash MD. Let's add a little bit of drop shadow, and 2XL is the size of the drop shadow. Let's add a border to it, so set the border to be solid. Let's add a background, so BG dash gray dash 600. Let's make it as a grid and set the gap to be 4 in between the elements. We will have 2 columns, so set the grid dash cols dash 2. On the left side we have an image, and on the right side we have a text. And we want to set the overflow to hidden, like so. So let me save this and let me reload the page. And there you go. This looks much nicer. As you can see on the bottom, we have this copyright text, and we have this nice background and the text on the right side and this image. And also we have these slightly rounded edges, so that's why we set the overflow hidden, so that the edges of the images are being cut off. And if we click on it, as you can see, we have this cursor pointer. We get redirected to Wikipedia, where you can read more about this event. Now what I want to add is the rest of the events below this. So below this div here, let's add another div. And let's add some spacing. So let's add a class name and set the margin top to be 6 and padding top to be 6 as well. Because we're going to have a divider in between these two elements. Margin sets the spacing after the border, and padding sets the spacing before the border. So let's add a title here, or actually as a subtitle. And let's say more events on this day, like so. And let's apply some styles to it. So let's add a class name, and let's set the font size to be text-2XL. And let's add some margin on the bottom as 4. As for the content for this part, we can even store it in a function. So let's call this function as get other events. Now let's create this function here. And here we're going to return a JSX code. So we're going to take the events and list, and we're going to slice the first element, because the first element we displayed on the featured event. So we're going to display the rest of the list. So if there is more elements than 1, let's map it. And here we can access the event, and let's make the callback function, or we can even return it right away. So just add brackets like so. And here we're going to have again an anchor tag, because we're going to have an external link to these articles. Whenever you have a map you want to add a key attribute so that React knows when to re-render the list. So let's add event.link as unique attribute. For the href, we will use the same property as well, event.link. We want to open this link in another tab, so let's set the target to be _blank, and let's position it as a relative. But actually, I don't think that we are displaying any image inside of this anchor tag, so we can remove this class name. Inside of this link, we're just going to add another div, and inside of this div, let's add a class name, and here we're going to set the maximum width to be MD, and we want to set some roundness to this div, so set the rounded -MD. So this stands for MD, stands for the medium. Okay, let's add a drop shadow, so drop -shadow to XL. Okay, let's add a border to solid. Let's add some background, so BG-gray-600, and let's add a margin bottom on the 6 and some padding 4. Inside of this div, we want to add a paragraph, and just to display it, event text, like so. Let me format this document. Let me save, and let me refresh our page. Boom. So we get our list of the events. So 1, 2, 3, 4 items from the list. And that basically sums up our page. So the only thing which is left to be done is to test our calendar. Do we get results changed when we change the date? So let's try that. So today is March 24th. If I click on the different date, and I know that in collection I have a date for 23rd as well. So let me click on it, and nothing is happening because we are closing this calendar before we actually execute the date change. So let's fix that. In our app.jsx file, let's scroll a bit down, and inside of the title, we want to set here on click, is calendar visible? We want to set it that it's visible to true. And then when we click on the data change here, handle data change, we want to set our calendar to be invisible. So use the function set is calendar visible to false, like so. Now let's save this and let's refresh the page. Let's try the March 23rd because I know we have data for this day as well. And there you go. Now we get the second image. We have this other data. That's awesome. And with this, we have completed our UR application. But before we proceed, I want to add one more thing to our Firebase function. So let's head over to our project again, and let's open the Firebase project that we created previously. So this day, and in some cases, Firebase could clean up this function before the execution of this promise gets completed. So how you make sure that the Firebase function is waiting for this function to be executed is you just return this, like so. And when you want to update your pub/sub function, you just head over to your terminal. Let's open up a git bash. You change the directory to the functions, and you just run Firebase deploy and hit enter. Just make sure to spell it correctly and hit enter. And deployment has been completed. Now we are sure that this function is going to wait this promise to complete, and there is not going to be any cleanup before that. And this sums up our project. Oops, I accidentally clicked on the link. And so just to sum up what we have completed today, we have created this pub/sub function on Firebase Cloud, which gets triggered every single day at midnight. Then it's running this Node.js function which triggers the Puppeteer. Then Puppeteer goes to the Wikipedia and scrapes the data from the page. Then we use that data and save it inside of our Firebase database here. And then we created this React application where we read all of that data. And since we uploaded our Firebase function, now we can go and build this UI and deploy it as well. So let's do that. Inside of our this day UI project, let's open up a terminal and let's clear the console if you have anything and just run npm run build and hit enter. This will take a couple of seconds, and as you can see, it's very fast in 1.7 seconds. Now let's clear this, and we can use now Netlify to use this dist folder to upload it. So let's head over to the Netlify. The exact URL is netlify.com. And here you want to sign up. Here I will have an account already, so I will just log in. And once you're logged in, you want to click here on Team Overview. You can click on Add New Site, and we just want to deploy manually here. And now we can drag and drop our folder. So I will just take this day UI folder, and I will just drag this dist folder inside of it and drop it. Now let's wait for a couple of minutes to upload. And once the upload has been completed, we get our URL. So let's click on it and to see if it works. And there you go. Another thing that you can do is you can go to the site settings, and if you want, you can update the name of the site. So here, click on the change site name, and you can get nicer URL like my scraping website or on this day dash website or whatever you want. Just save it and you get this nicer URL. And that's it. And that's it. If you have any ideas, what would you like for me to build in the next project, please leave a comment in the comment section below. Again, if this video reaches 1000 likes, I will be releasing full source code on my GitHub. But meanwhile, you can check my Patreon Code with Sloba to get the access to the full source code.
Well, that's all for this React video.
And thanks for stopping by.
And don't forget to subscribe.
Code with Sloba.
Thank you for watching the entire video. To see more React tutorials, click here.